education, career.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So, what was? I'm interested. Yeah, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but your education. You said you were kind of like a middle of the pack student. Was yeah, I'm interested. You know, like I said, your arc, but then also, what is education like at West Point? You know, the military education, because that, you know, there's a lot of people considering military, and you know, don't know what it's about. Kind of like you said your junior year, which I was kind of blown away by that. I kind of figured you were locked in early on, because it's such a hard thing to get into. West Point,
never heard of it.
Yeah, and then, you know, yeah. What's your thoughts? Maybe what you do differently, or what you've learned, or yeah.
This one could get deep. I'll try not to.
That's right. I'm realizing right now we're not going to get through all these topics.
That's right.
So there's definitely another podcast.
We got another one coming up. I got plenty of time. So I was a middle of the pack student, but that was because when it came to studying, I was very lazy. So
our arc is the same.
Okay, good.
At least at the beginning.
My entire life, I can say with certainty that, and this is not something I'm proud of, but I'm very good at figuring out the bare minimums that are required to achieve a level that I'm okay with. You know what I mean? So, like, I graduated from Westpoint, which is a rigorous academic program, with putting in very little effort.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very little effort. Like, I was never, like, maxed or stressed. But, you know, again, shame on me. Like, this goes back to not understanding. Like, so another way to look at this was, my 20-year-old brain said, okay, you can cram for this test at the last minute. You're going to pass. Don't worry about it. You don't need to excel. You just need to graduate. Nobody asks you your GPA, all that kind of stuff. The opportunity that I missed out on was learning how to put in an enormous amount of effort regardless of the outcome, right? Like, so I could work 40 hours and still get a C, or I could work 10 hours and still get a C. So I took the comfortable route, right? Doing the bare minimum. But I missed out on an opportunity to train myself to, one, put in the work regardless of the outcome. And then when you look back on it, you can look back with pride over that 4-year period where you say, yeah, I put it all out there. You know what I mean? So for a long time, I was walking that tightrope of just doing the bare minimum. And if I was being honest, it's probably be out of fear that, well, what's the point? It would seem silly to me to put in 40 hours of work for a test to go from a C to a C plus. If I put 40 in and I could get an A, that's great. But this way, I'll never know. I'll never have to know if I'm an A student or not.
You were thinking that deeply about it? Like,
well, not in hindsight, I am.
Oh, in hindsight. Okay.
But I think it was subconscious, where you're like, just like any endeavor that you take on. This is why a lot of people pull off the throttle, because they're like, but what if I give everything and I still fail? That would be embarrassing. So why don't I just give less, get an average mark, and then I can always be like, well, I could have worked harder. Right. You know what I mean? And I can look at that in every aspect of every area of my life, and that's actually really detrimental. I think that's one of the origins of regret, where you know, looking back over a 20-year window, where you're like, yeah, those are the areas that I didn't give it my all, because I was too afraid that if I gave it my all, and I might still fail. Right. And we now know life is sweeter when you give it your all and you fail than when you don't give it your all and maybe you pass a little bit. You know what I mean? Right. Like the attempt, the process is better than the outcome.
Do you think so? Early on, like, to me, I look at school, and like I was ADD before ADD was a thing, for sure. You know what I mean? Like,
I think I am too.
And there's no. I look at my 8-year-old self. There's no way I got anything out of sitting in a classroom.
Yeah.
I wasn't.
Right.
If I had to run a lap and then answer a question, run a lap, and answer a question, I'd be so much more focused.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
I kind of feel like school isn't set up for the way my male brain was developing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you kind of feel that way too?
Maybe not as much, but probably because I just was. I mean, actually, in high school, I did well. You know what I mean?
Right.
But also, based on very minimal effort. You know what I mean? I just kind of figured it out. Like I was like, okay.
Right, and I'm very similar to that.
Yeah, yeah. But another thing about raising kids, which is great, is you get to see a lot of your genes at that age. So it's like almost like looking in a mirror in the past, and you're like, oh, because I'm seeing it now with some of my kids, and I'm like, oh, that was the attitude I had.
But I'm guessing your sons, not your daughters.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. See, that's what I'm.
My daughters are very studious.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the boy girl thing, and
right.
I kind of feel like school's set up for girls, just the structure of it.
Right.
Their brains work well
right.
in that.
Yeah.
Where a young male, had just especially when testosterone
right.
hits.
Right. Yeah. But I think I didn't academically, like I said, I passed, which was great, and I got the degree, and I made, like I said, I made it harder on myself than I needed to. But actually, once I got out of West Point, I loved the military. The contrast was always that I felt like West Point treated you like like a child. You know what I mean? Like their whole thing was to try and break you down and make your life miserable and teach you discipline and all these kinds of things. You had no responsibility, and until you got higher in the ranks. But once you got in the Army, they treated you like an adult. They're like, this is what you have to do. We're going to hold you accountable and expect you to perform. And that environment, I was like, good, because I will do what I need to do. So, I enjoyed that period of time. Like I said, I just don't like being told what to do. You know what I mean? And then, West Point clearly opened a lot of doors for me. So, one, if anybody's thinking about going to the military, I always say, was it Dane Porter? Yeah, Dane went in, and I remember talking to him right before, and I'm like, look, if you don't know what you want to do when you're 18, the military is going to be great for you, and it's going to open doors afterwards, and it's also just an honor and a privilege to serve. So that's always a good thing. Right. And so getting out of the Army, I got out of the Army in 2008, 2009. The economy had just collapsed. We were in a complete recession, and nobody was hiring, but they were hiring military, people, because they knew that there was a certain amount of discipline and execution that was valuable, right? So I had opportunities, which was great. So I still look at that, that was one of the major benefits. And then I got into oil and gas early on. My first job was with a small oil and gas company that was drilling in Montana and had gas fields in Australia. And I got exposed. I got attached to the CEO. He was awesome, my first mentor, and he showed me the global oil and gas world, and I fell in love with it. Like it's energy, is what keeps the lights on. It's extremely important, and it's continuously going through transitions that are always exciting. Right. We're in a huge transition right now away from fossil fuels into, the energy transition and renewables, and it's always been exciting to me. I knew, I was like, this is what I want to do. And I got my MBA at the University of Oklahoma. Specialized in energy. It was a track specifically, so everybody that was there was typically from the oil and gas community. That I did when I was 33, 34, and even then at 34 I was still putting in the bare minimum. Really? So this is new. This is all new. You know what I mean? Where I kind of now know, what it takes to be happy with yourself and be at peace that you're putting in everything you need to put in. Right. But yeah, I've been doing oil and gas since, and it's been a really good career for me. It's a great industry with really like-minded people. A lot of military folks go into the oil and gas sector, and then the last 2 years I have kind of branched out on my own, self-employed, to do energy-related work. Right. And it's been really, really productive. Everything's going really well. It's a lot of work. You know what I mean? I'm very busy, but it's nice. The last 2 years when I went self-employed was the same 2 years that I've really started to take focus and pay attention to all this kind of stuff, and it helps with work, big time. You know what I mean? We spend more time at work than we do with anything else in the world. You know what I mean? With our kids, with our wives, with you're at work more than you are anywhere else. Right. And and that can consume you. It can ruin your life. It can bring you to the finish line and have you look back and be like, okay, I earned a salary. What now? What was the point of that? You know? So being intentional about it, and same thing, like, okay, this new project is just one new stress. It's another ultra marathon. There'll be times when I'm gonna want to fail or want to quit, you know, want to walk away, want to change courses. And when you develop this skill set, you can persevere through that, you know, in a more productive way.
Was there a great teacher along the way or two? Is it?
Yeah, I've been really blessed to have great mentors. Almost all of my bosses, other than one, but several bosses, and some of which are like my day-to-day mentors, which I'll call once a week and check in with, that have just been really helpful, you know.
Yeah, so my school, so elementary school was just a blur. Like I just made it through, right? Like, I mean, there's, I just don't think I fit. I wasn't, I couldn't, I mean, I did well enough to pass, you know. And then, I remember clearly in, like, I want to say 5th grade, it was in math class, and the stuff was just stupid easy. Like, it was just, it was ridiculously easy to me that what we're doing. And the teacher at the time, Mrs. Dufour, I think it was, she's like, she pulled me aside, she's like, you don't belong in this class. You need to be in a higher level. But I was in the lower level in the other classes.
Yeah.
And she went and fought for me, which, yeah, at the time, I didn't, whatever. Like,
Right.
I was literally on the minimal, whatever I gotta do to get through, you know,
Right.
like, and math was something I always, I was, even though I was kind of ADD, I was reasonably good enough at paying attention or getting the concepts that I could apply it to the test. I do well enough in the test, I never did homework.
Yeah.
And then they'd average off.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
She pulled me out and fought for me and got me into the higher, she's like, I don't care if it doesn't fit in the schedule, he belongs.
Right.
And she bumped me up, which put me on a trajectory into the higher level math group, which if I had stayed in this, you know,
Right.
I'd be a senior taking Algebra 1.
Yeah.
And then my freshman year of football in the weight room, I'm working out, and my math teacher, Mr. Bailey, who's one of the best teachers I've ever had, I want to say it was Algebra 1. He was my Algebra 1 teacher, and he worked out there. Mr. Bailey was kind of this chubbier kind of guy, you know, not a very fit kind of guy.
Yeah.
Was trying to get in shape. And Jim Walsh, the head football coach, varsity football coach, comes up and he goes, "So how's Ben as a student?" And Mr. Bailey considers a moment. He goes, if he's as good in football as he is in math, he'll be in the NFL." And that was like,
Yeah.
that blew my, I mean, it made me look good in front of my
Right.
future varsity coach,
Yeah.
who I had as a teacher in history, which I wasn't such a good
Probably
student.
not as good.
He was like, "This is not the student I expected."
Right.
Yeah, that was pretty, but I was putting in the minimal effort across the board.
Yeah.
And the one thing that on my arc that changed a lot, didn't change my effort, but, so I was dating Heather in high school, and she lived down Southern Maine, and we had, you know, long distance thing, and she wanted to be an editor, right? So I'm like, "You can edit my papers."
Yeah.
But that meant I had to have the paper done in time to mail it to her.
Yeah.
She'd have to open it, have time to edit it, and then send it back to me. So
Yeah.
I had to have my paper done like a week ahead of time.
Yeah.
Minimal, more than that usually. And then I started, by just that little process of getting it done 2 weeks early, basically, I'd be sitting in class and the teacher would be like, you know, "Make sure you have this in your paper." I'd already written my paper.
Right.
Oh, I'll go put that in.
Yeah.
And I never missed on things. Like,
Right.
and I literally, like, I used to joke, I learned the word procrastination.
Yeah.
Like, and then I started applying that across the board, just getting things done soon. I
Yeah.
wasn't putting in more effort.
Right.
To me, in my brain, it was like, no more effort, and I'm getting better grades.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that definitely helped me a lot. I struggled in college, especially when I was in engineering at first. Like, that was above my pay grade. And then, and like you said, I mean, it never really changed. It was just minimal effort to get the grade. And I don't know if, like, if I felt like I could put in a lot more effort for minimal gains, where I could just kind of,
Yeah.
you know, to go from a B to a B plus.
Right.
Was it worth that extra
Right.
effort? You know, I can go have fun with my friends
Right.
and get the B. I'm happy.
Right.
With it.
Right.
So that didn't really change for me in school. It's funny though. So then I became a teacher, and it, like, all of a sudden, like, I wanted to learn more.
Yeah.
Like, just
Yeah.
in general, like,
Right.
and there's some, and I think it's more maturity than even becoming a teacher. Like, where I was in life is like, education was, there's so many interesting things to learn out
Right.
there.
Right.
And so it's definitely changed to me. I still don't know if a classroom, actually online learning, I think works well for me.
Yeah.
Because I can just crank through something.
Right. Right.
I took one online math class, and like I remember, I'm emailing the teacher. I'm like, "You didn't post the final." He's like, "We're in the second week of the class." Yeah, I haven't written it.
Right.
So, yeah, but math. Luckily for me, math came easy to me. I got it, especially once the algebra. I've talked to my girls, like, and they definitely noticed. There's a point where you hit algebra, and like a certain number of students just fall
Right.
off. Like they
Yeah.
for whatever reason, that's a struggle for them wrapping their brains. Where I'm like, you guys, if you're like me, that'll be the point where you excel.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just made sense to me,
Right.
and it was, yeah, it came easy.
Yeah.
But because it came easy, I didn't put in the effort.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. I think, I mean, a lot of this is, there is a maturity element to it where you get older and you can reflect back on things and you can, like, understand, okay, yeah, I could have done that better,
Right.
you know. And I suspect that, you know, when I'll end up having these conversations with my kids in their 20s, they're not going to understand what I'm saying, you know, because they're still trying to figure it out, you know, on their own. But I think one of the biggest things is, just like you said, I mean, you're like, well, why put in more effort with an incremental improvement, you know, on the outcome? And that is actually a really bad way of thinking about life, you know what I mean? And because it seeps into everything that you do, once you allow that to be, you know, you're like, well, what's the point, you know what I mean? And it's very much correlated to what we're doing on the road, which is, you know, like, I'm not going to win anything when it comes to ultra marathons, or I'm not going to break any records, you know what I mean? And I could go from a 9-hour 50 mile to an 8-hour 45 minute. What's the point? You know what I mean?
Right.
And the point is the process. You know what I mean? It's being proud of yourself for putting in all that effort, not worrying about what the outcome's going to be, and overcoming the fears and the challenges. That's the win.
Right.
It's not the finish line. You know what I mean? And that is life. You know what I mean? That's why I think so many people are disheartened with modern day America, because they were told, like, get a good education, get a good job, get a family, retire, have wealth, and they get to that point, and they checked all the boxes, but they don't have anything to show for it. You know what I mean? There is no arriving. You know, we don't arrive ever.
Or they're not happy.
Yeah, right. And it's like, what was the point of that? Well, it's like, well, what did you learn along the way? You know what I mean? Where did you challenge yourself? What bad things did you overcome? Is it time out?
No, but there's a message. I have a reboot. No, don't reboot.
So, you know, that's what I try and help the kids with, like, you know, because you can get wrapped up on the test. Like, I've got to pass this test, or I've got to do this, you know what I mean? But it's like, well, let's just talk about the process, you know what I mean? Like, I don't care, you're not ever going to use algebra again in your life. I'm sorry, but you're not, you know, but can you look back on that and be like, this was very hard for me, I overcame it by putting in my maximum effort, and I wasn't really worried about the outcome. That you can apply to the rest of your life. Your A on your algebra high school test, you'll never see again, you know what I mean? But learning how to get through that process, you know, and that's what I missed out on in my younger years, you know what I mean?
I disagree with you on the algebra thing.
You still use it?
Abstract thinking.
Oh, well, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
well, critical problem solving, for
right,
sure.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
which is what most of high school is or should be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's,
But I also tell you, so this is another thing that is, I'm also enjoying this period of my life because I've had this conversation with my kids. I don't think I should have went to West Point. So I have my brother, I would say my brother is a creative. He has a good balance between like the practical and the creative, but he's far more creative. I'm more on the practical side, which is why I went into the military, but I have a creative side of me that I just didn't explore when I was younger. You know what I mean? And that's where a lot of that anti-authoritarianism, I like to kind of chart my own path. Like I don't like the masses, you know what I mean? I like to try to think differently, you know what I mean? But I never nurtured it, you know, when I was younger. I actually wanted to be an actor, which I would have probably failed at. But I wanted to go in that kind of route. And, you know, I didn't, you know, I went the practical route, you know what I mean? And God bless my dad, he did a great job of coaching me through West Point, because I call him dozens of times being like, I want to quit. Like, this is not for me.
Wow.
I shouldn't, this is not the route that I should be on. And he walked me through it, and I'm glad that I did. But in hindsight, there's probably a different path that I could have taken that was a little bit more true to who I was as a person. What we're doing right now is allowing me to exercise that, which is cool. Right. Because now I'm like, now I can build the life that I actually want to live and be proud of. And it's not the life that looks like white picket fence, 2.2 kids, dog, and car. It's, you know, in exercising your creative brain, like what can we do with all of this? Like, this is exciting. What can I do as a self-employed person? What can I do with my ultra marathons? You know what I mean? And, you know, maximizing that side of it. So that is what I try to explain to my kids. Like, I don't want them to have any pressure from me that you got to go become an accountant or a teacher or any of these kinds of things. Like, I would rather you take a chance on things that maybe are a little outside the box and fail, and then maybe redirect at the time. But what I absolutely require is that when you're going down that road, you're giving it maximum effort. Right. Because then you won't have a regret. You're like, I tried to become an artist, I failed, but I didn't put in the minimum. You know what I mean? Right. So that's like the academic and the career side of things. Because I just know way too many people that are just checking the box on the career. Like, they make good money, they got a good title, and they're very unhappy. You know, and I'm like, what's that worth? You know, right. And I mean, I get it. Like, there's a lot of pressure. It's just like sitting at a table with an empty plate around a bunch of people that are eating lunch. Like, you don't want to be that oddball that just kind of like goes off and, like, you know, lives your own weird life for a while, because there's so much social pressure to when you're gonna get married, when you're gonna have kids. Like, but it can be damaging over the course of a 30-year span if you're wake up when you're 50 and you're like, I didn't do any of the things that I wanted to do. Right. You know, so I think, and also just, I mean, I think academics are just different now. Like, college is just, for a lot of people, a waste of money. But that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, and I also look at, like, kind of when we were talking about nutrition, how a little bit of positive starts snowballing.
Yeah.
If you, like, I look back, like, at English class, if I put more effort into English class earlier on, then it makes my papers easier later. You know, right. I'm not having so many grammatical errors later on. And then now when I'm typing up an email, like, you know, sometimes I type emails to you, and I'm just so excited to get it off, and I send it and I reread it. I'm like, why did I reread this first? Like, those are such stupid bits, but I was just, like, excited to type. But it's so much of, but you put in that little extra effort, it snowballs into positivity.
Yeah.
And it can go the other way.
Right.
Which, you know, there was definitely a point where I was like, I gotta make up some ground that I lost somewhere around sophomore year of high school. Actually, junior year of high school, they had an honor pass. So, like, if you had a B or above average, you could, study halls, you didn't have to go to study halls, you could be anywhere in the school.
Oh, yeah.
You weren't supposed to leave school, we used to leave school.
Yeah.
But that was like, oh, I gotta have that.
Right, that's worth it.
That's the one thing for me, like, dangling a carrot definitely was what would get me.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I wasn't looking long term. But those positive things, pushing a little bit. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm gonna get through one more. Oh, this is kind of an interesting. So, upbringing, how the life growing up in your family.
Yep.
Your thoughts
Curious. Keep
on, oh, I got a lot.
Yeah, I know. I'm just curious.
You know, how your parents raised you,
Yeah.
how you're raising your kids differently or the same, or because it's pretty. I mean, we're influenced by how we're raised. You know, we don't.
Is this being recorded? I gotta be careful what I say.
I know. No, this is just for us. No, I just think to me, it's one of those really interesting topics, and you know, there's so many. There's no book. There's no rules like how do you raise your
Right.
kids, and
Right.
you're just doing the best you can. But there's certain things that we decide to do or not decide to do, and then we regrets and
Yeah.
and then how and it's such an interesting, like, looking back. I mean, like, parenting. My parents drove us to Daytona in a station wagon with a mattress in the back that we used to sleep on during the
Yeah.
drive.
Yeah.
No not only no seatbelts,
Right.
you know, it's just a different world.
Yeah.
So I mean, the way, like, I want to have, like, my father on this podcast and kind of see what his perspective on how
Yeah.
and how things have changed, and everybody
Right.
thinks the next generation has it so easy.
Right. I know.
So what are your thoughts? And then, if you don't mind, and honestly, if you don't want to talk about it, feel free. But there's a stage in your life where you lost your sister,
Oh yeah.
and I can't even imagine what that was like for your parents and their grieving,
Right.
and how you all got through that.
Right.
I mean, I knew Jenny as a sweet girl, and
Right.
but I didn't know her closely.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
and that was that was hard for me to deal with.
Right.
From a distance. I can't even imagine. So that process too.
Yeah, that probably has way more impact on my childhood than I actually
Yeah. How old
think
were you?
about it. I was 6.5.
Okay. And she was what, 2-3 years
She
younger?
died when she was 3.5.
Okay.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, I think that generations are always just on the macro scale an overcorrection from the previous generation, right? If you look at the 50s to the 60s, right? So you had the World War II generation, like our grandparents and George Curtis, like super strict, you know what I mean?
George Curtis Jr.
Yeah.
Because my dad's George Curtis, the third.
The third, oh, okay, I didn't know that.
You didn't know my dad was
No.
the third?
No, oh wow.
I was close to being the fourth.
Oh,
There was a long time I was like, thank God that didn't happen. I'm like, there's a point now I'm like,
yeah.
that would have been kind of cool.
Yeah, I've got a third, and he said he's gonna have a fourth. But so like, there's always this constant overcorrection, right? Like the kind of love and peace generation, kind of running away from the overly strict, you know, environment, and I can't remember the connection, but I think somewhere in there, like we've got the, you know, the helicopter parents, where, you know what I mean, we are fearful of everything, and that's going to create some sort of overcorrection.
And snowplow parents,
What's that one?
where they just clear every obstacle.
Right, for them, right, which is so detrimental. I mean, but everything we just talked about is what you're eliminating from your kid's future. So, you know, I actually think, you know, I don't know how you classify the 90s, but I loved it. I thought it was a great generation. We were still out in the backyard playing. I don't remember being home ever. I was out with my friends all the time. It was safe. It was just a really great time to grow up, I think. But there's been overcorrections over the last couple of generations. We're all complaining about millennials and now the new generation, but it's just this perpetual cycle, in my opinion.
Right.
You know what I mean? But as far as being like, I always, so I spent a lot of time thinking about this, because the way my characterization is, I had a great family growing up. You know what I mean? Like, loving parents, good siblings, lots of fun, safe environment. It was a really great place, middle America, you know what I mean? We weren't poor, we weren't rich, I had good friends. Like, I look back with fondness of my first 18 years, you know what I mean?
What about discipline-wise? Like, how were your parents as disciplinary?
Like,
did you get spanked?
Yeah, I got spanked,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I was afraid of dad, you know what I mean? Mom ran the house, you know what I mean? She stayed home.
What do you think of that afraid of dad thing? Because
I liked it. Like,
and it's not even
he wasn't abusive.
Yeah, I don't know if they're afraid it more like respect. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what the right word is, but you weren't in fear of your dad.
No,
but
no.
You knew
Yeah,
if you
and
crossed the
my
line-
dad's been my best friends for all 40 years. Like I work with him. I work for his business now. He's my go-to if I'm having a life crisis. Like, we've always had a great relationship. You know what I mean? So, but it was a traditional family environment where, you know, mom stayed home, dad went to work. He, you know, if I got into trouble, dad was the one that was going to do the discipline. We goofed off. You know what I mean? So I had a great childhood, but the amount of behavioral issues that I deal with, and we all have them. You know what I mean? The amount of behavioral issues, anxiety. I went through depression in college for different reasons. All of the stuff that I'm grappling with right now. Any clinical psychologist almost always points that back to your childhood. So I'm actually spending a lot of time kind of figuring out, like, what happened in my childhood that has produced this brain that I'm now struggling with.
Right.
That is, like, I always say my brain is just a bully. You know what I mean? Like, it's always telling me, like, you're not good enough, you should quit, like, you're gonna fail, and I'm like, why is that there? You know what I mean? And there's all kinds of explanations for it. But I had a great upbringing. I